the fog of war. Back in 2004, Tattoo and Rammstein made a song called Yugoslavia, mourning the loss of that country, which was broken up from horrific war and infighting, mostly due to the fault of Serbia. But it looks like Tattoo's going to need to make a new song on the destruction of the Ukraine. Ukraine, it won't be the same after 2022. Over these past few days, there's been many topics I would like to record a video on, but war is constantly changing, and it's difficult for anyone to keep up. When you turn on the television, you see a lot of people talking, but none of the experts know what to do. And that's truly a frightening thought, that every expert you see on TV has no idea what to do. They have lots of opinions, but what does it matter? We have lots of questions and no answers. I wanted to make a video, though, just to express my support for Ukraine President Zelensky, the man who Trump called, congratulating him on his election win, the man who has survived numerous assassination attempts by Putin. And he looks haggard, he looks drawn. This is not the sort of presidency he wanted. Imagine the stress a human being is undergoing, where the entire country of Russia is trying to kill him, one man. I don't know how any human being can get up each day with that stress, but you can see it on his face. And we have NATO bureaucrats showing how useless that organization is. They refused to draw any line in the sand in front of Putin because he's got nukes, he's got satellite killers, he's got submarines. NATO should hang their heads in shame. I just wanted to touch on a few topics. A subtopic here of the news media in America still hard at work attempting to help the Democratic Party and Joe Biden as a matter of domestic political policy. We've got a war going on that could lead to World War III, but the corporate news media, the media conglomerates, cable news, network news, the print news, they're all working overtime to pretend and fabricate that former President Donald Trump admires Putin, that former President Donald Trump supports Putin, that Trump endorses Putin and endorses his efforts in the Ukraine. This is a concerted media narrative by Democrat news organizations with one express goal: to separate Donald Trump from his base of support so that you will then turn to Joe Biden and vote Democrat in the election this year and in 2024. There is no other purpose to reporting, labeling Trump a Russian sympathizer. And they have to misquote him to make this approach.
This is one of the cuts that the left-wing media decided to run with and argue somehow that Trump was praising Putin when it was far from the case. But we'll play this audio for you. This was yesterday with Buck and I at Mar-a-Lago. Let's play cut one.
I went in yesterday and there was a television screen, and I said, this is genius. Putin declares a big portion of the Ukraine. Putin declares it as independent. Oh, that's wonderful. So Putin is now saying it's independent, a large section of Ukraine. I said, how smart is that? And he's going to go in and be a peacekeeper. That's the strongest peace force. We could use that on our southern border. That's the strongest peace force I've ever seen. There were more army tanks than I've ever seen. They're going to keep peace all right. No, but think of it. Here's a guy who's very savvy. I know him very well, very, very well. By the way, this never would have happened with us. Had I been in office, not even thinkable. This would never have happened. But here's a guy that says, you know, I'm going to declare a big portion of Ukraine independent. He used the word independent. And we're going to go out and we're going to go in and we're going to help keep peace. You got to say that's pretty savvy. And you know what the response was from Biden? There was no response. They didn't have one for that. Now it's very sad.
The Democratic Party falsified what Donald Trump said to them about how Donald Trump didn't say he admired Putin. He said that Putin played the West and Joe Biden for fools, and he was exactly right. We don't have a strong leader opposing Putin. And if journalism was real in 2022, we would have every single reporter in the United States demanding to see the transcript of Joe Biden's December video call with Vladimir Putin. Instead, not one news organization, not one reporter is asking the White House for a transcript of what the exchange was between the two leaders. That's how incurious the news media is in 2022. But they're all working overtime to destroy Donald Trump, which is just insane. Trump's not invading anybody. He's not destroying anybody. I just wanted to read from a sampler of news stories here. In particular, CNN. Even without Jeff Zucker, they are still faking, fabricating, and falsifying the news, even as life and death hangs in the balance in Europe. This is from the Washington Examiner. Here's a quote from Ukraine President Zelensky. By refusing to establish a no-fly zone, today NATO leaders gave the green light for further bombing of Ukraine's cities and villages, Zelensky said on Friday. All the people who will die from this day will also die because of you, because of your weakness, because of your disunity. Now that quote is a direct slam on the ability of Joe Biden to organize a resistance to Putin. It's a direct slam on the leadership of NATO, cowering and quaking in their boots that Putin might launch a nuke at them. And so therefore, the logic goes, since they're afraid that Putin has nuclear weapons, therefore Putin cannot be opposed militarily ever. So basically, the attitude of NATO, if I understand the logic here, is that Putin is entitled to conquer the entire world, because you can't stop him from invading the rest of the countries of Europe, from invading North and South America and Asia. He could invade every country in the world because NATO says we can't act militarily because Putin might use a nuclear weapon. So therefore, Putin has no restrictions on his behavior. That's the message that NATO just sent to Putin, and Zelensky is calling them out on this. Cowardice in the face of nuclear blackmail is no policy at all. Now let's go to thehill.com. Here's another quote. This is from Press Secretary Jen Psaki on Thursday last week. It would require, essentially, the U.S. military shooting down Russian planes and prompting a potential direct war with Russia, the exact step that we want to avoid. In his video address, Zelensky disputed the fact that it would result in a direct confrontation between NATO countries and Russia, calling it self-hypnosis. Quote, I do not know how you can protect and whether you can protect NATO countries, Zelensky said. You will not be able to buy us off with liters of fuel for liters of our blood. But let's read through the CNN story. Ukrainian President Zelensky reiterated his plea for NATO to establish a no-fly zone over Ukraine, stressing on Thursday that this would be the most important step as Ukraine faces incessant bombing by Russia. Quote, we want a no-fly zone because our people are being killed. From Belarus, from Russia, these Iskander missiles and bomber planes are coming, Zelensky said. I asked President Biden and Schultz and Macron, and I said, if you can't provide a no-fly zone right now, then tell us when. Speaking during a televised news conference in Kiev, the Ukrainian president went on to ask how many more people in Ukraine must be killed before NATO agrees to enact a no-fly zone. If you can't give Ukrainians a date, how long do you need? How many people should be blown up? How many arms and legs and heads should be severed so that you understand? I will go and count them, and we will wait until we have a sufficient number, Zelensky said in an impassioned plea. If you don't have the strength to provide a no-fly zone, then give me planes. Would that not be fair? He continued. So that's not bad for CNN, all things considered. But as long as CNN is able to massage and adjust real-time quotes from the Ukraine president so that it only appears like he's criticizing some bureaucrat in NATO and not criticizing Joe Biden, CNN will continue to massage the news to fit the domestic agenda of the Democratic Party. And go back here to a news story. Many people might be wondering, did the Biden White House bring in Republican leadership while all this bombing and war was taking place? Was on Thursday, March 3rd, 2022. This is well over a week after the war started. Now, the New York Times reported on February 25th, 2022, that over a span of 3 months, senior Biden administration officials held half a dozen urgent meetings with top Chinese officials in which the Americans presented intelligence showing Russia's troop buildup around Ukraine and beseeched the Chinese to tell Russia not to invade, according to U.S. officials. U.S. officials got intelligence showing Beijing had shared the information with Moscow, telling the Russians that the United States was trying to sow discord. And then we have a confirmation on this story dated February 24th. President Joe Biden briefed leaders in the U.S. Congress about the crisis in Ukraine in a secure call on Thursday. Biden spent an hour this afternoon on the phone with Democratic and Republican leaders in Congress, briefing them on the situation on a secure call. So what does the timeline show you here? It shows that Joe Biden and the Chinese admirers in the Biden White House trusted the Communist Chinese Party with intelligence on Russia's troop buildup more than they trusted Republican leaders. It looks like China was getting continual briefings here from China Joe, and the Republican leadership was like an afterthought for the Biden White House. Let's get back to the fake news about Donald Trump. After he spoke on the Clay Travis Buck Sexton show, and the entire American news media took his comments out of context to claim that Trump was citing and praising Putin, which many Republican rhinos then ran with as an opportunity to attack Trump. Donald Trump spoke at CPAC, and he made very clear that he opposed Putin, he opposed the invasion of Ukraine, and that Trump believes that President Biden, through a series of deliberate policies to cancel America's energy independence and to enrich Russia through Russia's energy sales, that Joe Biden created the situation that led to the invasion of Ukraine. And Trump is well founded on that by the actions of Joe Biden. From the day of his inauguration, Joe Biden canceled the Keystone Pipeline and canceled other avenues of American energy independence. Joe Biden canceled the restrictions Trump had on Nord Stream 2, shipping natural gas from Russia to Germany. So everything Trump said at CPAC was 100% true and correct. This is an Associated Press story. GOP torn as Greene speaks to far right amid Putin chants. We can't actually look that up on YouTube. We can't actually play you this speaking event that these Putin supporters had in Orlando recently. But this particular clip is permitted by YouTube, and I want to just play a small portion of the comments here by the people there, because we were told there's Putin chants, and this was seized by every news outlet across the country. Now, I don't know who this group is. I don't know who their speakers are. I don't know anything about this Representative Greene, but let's play their comments and listen.
It's now a familiar clip of video. Georgia Republican Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene welcomed by Nick Fuentes at his America First Political Action Conference in Orlando this past Friday.
Bear in mind that this is not the CPAC conference, which Donald Trump spoke at. America First PAC has nothing to do with that.
Just after Fuentes rallied the crowd.
Can we give a round of applause for Russia? Yes. Absolutely.
I heard like one guy saying Putin. Look here at this story by the Associated Press. Crowd erupted in chants of Putin. One guy is not a crowd erupting in chants of Putin. So I don't know who these people are, but listen to this. Listen to what she says here. This is very peculiar.
Because you know what it's like to be canceled And that's why I'm here to talk to you tonight. I don't believe anyone should be canceled.
Since then, the GOP has been divided on whether to criticize Greene.
So I don't know if she was saying she thought Putin was being canceled. I don't agree with anything these people are saying. I don't know who they represent. Why did the news media amplify this Representative Greene and Putin chants? They have one goal, to say that 74 million Trump voters from the 2020 presidential election are Putin supporters. And their goal in this is to divide Americans against one another so that you will then show up at the polls in 2022 and 2024 and say, I am so ashamed that Trump is a Putin supporter. I will now vote Democrat and vote Democrat for the rest of my life. This is fake journalism to amplify these people and say they speak for any Trump supporter. I voted for Donald Trump 4 times in the primaries and in presidential elections. I have never seen Donald Trump express admiration for Russia or Putin's Russia in any way. It's all a media fabrication dating back to when Hillary Clinton was touting her foreign policy experience as a 2016 presidential candidate. Candidate Donald Trump rightly criticized her record as Secretary of State for Barack Obama. The news media took Donald Trump's criticism and turned it on its head to say Trump must be Putin's best friend because he dared criticize Hillary Clinton's track record of 4 years as Obama's Secretary of State. Not one reporter said, hey, what kind of lousy Secretary of State only does the job for 4 years under Obama? Hillary should be criticized for this. No. And they turned that into the entire Russian collusion narrative. So why dig this up now? Because the entire news media has mobilized to once again say, if you support Donald Trump, then that means you are the enemy of all free people. You are siding with Putin. And this is kind of the argument that they used during the Iraq War, unfortunately. If you are against George W. Bush, then you must be on Saddam's side. Joe Biden also voted for the Iraq War. And he wanted to get out in front and be seen supporting George W. Bush for the Iraq War. But now we're told any criticism of Joe Biden is a wartime crime, and that's the narrative. If we go back to last summer, a war crime could be argued was created by the American president, Joe Biden. Joe Biden's foolish, unplanned withdrawal from Afghanistan, which only had political planning in the White House to blame it on Donald Trump. They didn't have a single serious plan for the actual withdrawal. The only plan they had, according to Jen Psaki and investigative reporting by the Washington Post, was to just politically spin whatever disaster happened in Afghanistan at the hands of the Taliban and the terrorists there. And that's in fact what happened. Joe Biden created an entire nation of refugees from Afghanistan, and his entire staff went out on TV and declared it a perfect withdrawal and a perfect success. Now we're being told in 2022 that Vladimir Putin is a war criminal for, among other crimes, creating a nation of refugees in the Ukraine. Well, folks, if that's the definition of a war criminal, unfortunately, President Joseph R. Biden also fits that description, because he abandoned the people of Afghanistan almost in the same way that NATO is abandoning the people of Ukraine in the face of rape by Russian troops, of slaughter by Russian troops, and there doesn't seem to be anyone with a backbone to protect the people of Ukraine from a Russian nuclear bear. I am pleased that the Ukraine people are giving Putin an aggravating time. He might start executing Russian generals as the progress slows. It's reminiscent of how Finland valiantly stood up to the Soviet Union in 1938 and 1939 prior to World War II. Now Ukraine stands up to Russia, and it seems that all the military hardware in the world stops in the face of raw courage. Thank you, Ukraine. Joe Biden still can't answer press questions to this day. Mourn for the people of Ukraine with Western defenders like Joe Biden, Europe, and the rest of NATO. Thank you.